This is Grapplers Talk.
What is up, fans of Grapplers Talk? This is Dave coming at you with another episode each and every week. Thank you to all of the fans for downloading the podcast. Thank you for being a part of this and tuning in each and every week. I'm always here trying to bring you guys the best grappling content and talk to the most interesting people, man. And, this world has a weird way of connecting everyone, and through the power of social media and obviously jiu-jitsu and grappling, we've been able to make some awesome connections on this show. And I'm really excited to have a guest on today and learn a little bit about what he's doing. And I really support his mission and what he's been working on. And man, this gentleman's really interesting, and I'm excited to talk to him. I'd like to welcome to the show, man, Chris Ortiz. Welcome to Grapplers Talk, brother. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Big Dave? Doing good. Blessed. Spring break, man. Couldn't be doing better.
Yeah. And man, dude, I wanted to have you on. You have an interesting kind of career path, I'd have to say, but you've been a long time educator, man, and that's really awesome. But you're also a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, so I want to start there and just get to hear how you got into Jiu-jitsu, where you started. Did somebody drag you kicking and screaming into the gym, or how did that come to be? And talk about your journey a little bit.
All right. I think my journey is very typical for a lot of gentlemen. Pretty good athlete in high school and college. Played some high school baseball, a little bit of college baseball, college rugby. But then when you get out of college, there's like a gap. There's something missing. You like that camaraderie, the group of people to hang out with and do hard things with. So probably about like 7-8 years after I got out of college, and all the other things I was doing, like softball and pickup basketball, just weren't doing it for me. I had stumbled upon a jiu-jitsu gym. It was Gracie Baja, the Woodlands, and I drove past it for like 2 weeks, and I was scared. I was nervous. I thought there'd be monsters and sharks, swimming around in there, and there were, right, but they weren't mean, or they weren't ugly, or they weren't fake. It was just some monsters of a different sort, and I go in. I fancy myself a really good athlete, and I get to train with a gentleman by the name of Professor Chad Robo. And he was a little guy. He's 5'3", about 140, 145. And I probably had about like 30 pounds on him and a couple of inches, and considered myself a fairly good athlete. And wow, I got humbled really quick. And he did it, in the most gentlest, kindest, but also most restrictive way possible. And from that moment, I was hooked.
Yeah, it's crazy how being so humbled makes you go back and want more, right?
Oh my God, yeah. Like the way that I saw it is, it almost felt like a magical power. Like he had the ability to read what I was going to do before I even knew what I was going to do. Being a black belt now, I see where he was at. You can kind of like feel where the tide is taking you, and if you have the experience, you can always beat your opponent, if you got, more experience.
Yeah.
Beat him to the spot, right? Or bait him to the spot. So the shoe's on the other foot now, and I'm the old guy, that's kind of small, that's giving the youngsters some humble pie. But I try to do it, in the best way possible, to where they continue to walk through those doors, because we all need good training partners.
Right. It's our training partners that makes us the athletes that we are, right? Without them, we're really not anything.
No, we need the ones that are going to, humble us. we need the ones that are going to allow us to try the new stuff. And then we need the ones that we're going to stalemate against, and all three have equal value, so I'm 40, going on 46 now. And my role has changed in the gym, over the years. But it's nice to age into this new era of where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Your role changing in the gym, and it's crazy when you first start in jiu-jitsu. It seems like such a long path to get that black belt, and you see the veterans in the room, the people, the purple belts, the brown belts that have been training for a while and putting in the time and energy. And, you know, if you have good ones around, they pour into you as a youngster or as a, you know, beginner. And regardless of age, right? I've seen young men that are 20 years old that have the wisdom of a, you know, 40-year-old man. But, you know, it's very important that, you know, we have those older generations putting into us, and then all of a sudden the tide starts to shift, right? We become that guy that's pouring into those newbies and, you know, those fresh white belts that have never tried out jujitsu, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a sign of a healthy gym. You know, when you have a little bit of everything, you don't want it to be too top heavy, and you don't want it to be too bottom heavy. You know, you need a little bit of everything if your jujitsu is truly going to continue to evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about your journey along the way. You know, obviously you've been training for quite some time to get to black belt, but did you do any competitions or MMA or what was the pursuit behind just gaining knowledge?
So when I joined, I was 29 going on 30, you know, and I had a couple of kids younger in life. So I competed heavily at white and blue, you know, and I do really well. But something that ended up occurring, and it kind of went against the way that I saw jujitsu, was that I became very indulgent. I spent a lot of money on these competitions. I was at the gym more than I needed to be, and I needed to course correct. You know, so there's about like 2 or 3 years where I was very heavy in that scene, and they got a lot of my money and a lot of my time, and I needed to pull back because my kids were getting old enough to where they were venturing out and playing other team sports,
Yeah.
you know, like volleyball, basketball, you know, just traditional things, you know. So I went into a hobbyist mode probably like right before I turned into a purple belt, because that was what was right for the family. And
Yeah.
jiu-jitsu, it's supposed to be all about balance. So for me to maintain balance, I needed to pull back.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was about to talk about balance. You know, you have to have that balance. You know, if your relationships at home aren't, you know, getting the best of you and jujitsu's getting all of you, then, you know, you gotta even things out, right? You can't lose what you love. And you know, there's definitely no problem with being a hobbyist in jujitsu. You know, it's different journey for everybody and no two journeys are alike, right?
Yeah, and I think what makes jujitsu special is like you can be a hobbyist, but like you can still, you know, train hard, and
Yeah.
you could find training partners that are going to push you to your limits, and you could also venture out to other schools and go to open mats, and it's like playing pickup basketball, right? Like it's essentially playing the same game, just, you know, without all the formalities, you know. So it still helps me with my diet, it still helps me with my nutrition and my sleep and my rest. But with that being said, it enables me to put my family first, you know,
Yeah.
where they belong.
Yeah, that's you know, the best thing possible, man. And you know, obviously jujitsu it will take a lot of people get addicted to it, right? It'll take a big portion of your life, but you know, even if you're a competitor or in the comp scene a lot, you need those hobbyists in the room to get better, right? You can't just roll with killers all the time. I mean, you'll be beat up a lot. So, you know, you need some hobbyists. You need kind of an even playing ground with everybody, right?
I would agree with you, you know, heavily. And, you know, there's even levels to the hobbyist game too. So, you know, we have a gym at Gracie Baja the Woodlands, you know, where we have, you know, a couple of guys that are fighting in the UFC currently, you know, and we've got guys that are just scratching right there at the ceiling to get in, and a whole host of other, you know, competitors. So we have a healthy gym, and you're gonna work hard. It doesn't matter, you know, what day you walk in. Like you're gonna feel like you've been in something.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. And I kind of want to get into your career path, and that's something I usually don't do too much on Grapplers Talk, but I think it all ties in together. And so, being a educator for 20 years, let's hear how you got into education. Why did you get into education? What was the driving factor that pursued you to go that career path?
So, like as a young man, I didn't see a lot of value in school, and I wasn't even really a good student. I was someone that attended school for two reasons. Like one, I wanted to continue to play baseball because baseball is what I loved, and then two, it's like I didn't want my mom to beat me, and not, you know, physically beat me, but you know, the disappointment, the shame, and the groundings and whatnot. Academics just didn't do it for me, right? But there were these people along the way that kind of served as guides to help me get from one side of the river to the other side. And it was always my coaches, so when I got out of high school and I played a little college ball and whatnot, I recognized the importance of having good mentors, good coaches, people that are put in your life to help you get from like one lily pad to another, so to speak. And I wanted to be that, for the young people in our community. So I would say that it was really the coaches in my life that helped me make my mind up when it came to a career of choice.
Yeah. So just like you can have a good coach put you into a good path, you can also have the opposite, right? A bad coach puts you into a bad path, right?
Oh my God. Yeah. And I've had my fair share of those, but the thing I would like to say to those folks is that like we can also learn from their mistakes and the way that they mishandle situations. You could either follow suit, or you can, go the opposite direction. So they taught me what not to do because they scarred me. The few and I had in between, they scarred me.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen it, not only in, just high school sports, but I've seen it all throughout different levels of athletics. I think first story I think of, my cousin was a great baseball player, wanted to pursue it as a career and really loved the sport. He'd watch every game and try to be involved with it as much as possible. But then one of those bad coaches came, right? And really kind of took the love out of the game for him. And really, I don't think he ever played baseball again, man. And that, obviously that's the worst case scenario is taking the love out of something. And, as a coach, we're meant to uplift these young men and young women and make them the best of themselves, not the opposite, right?
Yeah, there's definitely like as a coach, there's a balance that, we need to strike. We need to preach discipline, and we need to instill it in our athletes. But there also has to be like that fun aspect, because at the end of the day, it's like it's fun is what keeps bringing us back to the table, whether it's jiu-jitsu or basketball or baseball or whatnot. Like it has to be a place that we willingly come back to revisit, to soak up knowledge. And if that's not the case, like you're not going to have people hanging around or wanting to play.
Yeah. Yeah, you're very right, man. And so when talking to you, I looked a little bit into your history, and I saw that you had written several children's books, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get involved in that?
So during COVID, what was this, 2020? We had a lot of time to ourselves. And I think people went in two directions. I think some people, took it as an opportunity just to indulge and not do anything. Right. And then some people looked at it as like, oh my God, I've got all this time in my hands and I can chase any and every dream that I've ever wanted to. So I don't do good with downtime. So I got to working on, these books, and they make me happy. They're about things that are important and special to me. So it makes it very easy to write them.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting into something like that, man, it's you can really tell you got a heart for it, man. And you got a heart for putting into students and the youth in your community. And, obviously they tell you read to your children every night and as much as possible. Right. So, we need more and more books. My daughter loves books. We go to the library on a regular basis. She's 2 years old, and, she's always looking into new books, and, having a new variety and a different perspective on things is what's needed, man. And, talk to me about how how the books come together. Like when you're creating a book, like where do you draw inspiration from? Do you do all of the artwork yourself? How does all of that work or tie in together? Or what motivates you when you're doing that?
So the motivation is I like to write about things that are important to me. So I've written 6 books, and if you look at the topic or the subject matter, like one has been about a relationship between a mother and her son, right? And that obviously it ties back to my mom raising me and my brother, right? And I got one where me and my father, we peruse the city of Houston and we take in all the sights and all the sounds. And that's again, it's a throwback, to my relationship with my father. My parents are divorced. It wasn't the best of situations growing up, but there was definitely silver linings, and I wanted to write about them. I've got one about being a teacher and seeing all that hidden potential that our kids have, because there's a lot of kids that keep getting in trouble, but these same, like, I'm going to call them talents, these same talents that get them in trouble inside of the school day, they could take them and become, entrepreneurs. The kid that's selling candy inside of school that, bought the bag of chips for 50 cents, a pack, but then he's flipping them for like $1 or $2, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
oh my God, that guy's going to be okay. They're going to write him up and put him in ISS, but heck, like, he's quadrupling his money. So
Yeah. That's funny you say that, man. I think back to kids that, probably weren't the best students, but they're over there. They got little businesses going, little side hustles going, or whatever you want to call it. But I remember a kid, he used to sell like the small little candy bars, but obviously, you could only buy stuff at lunchtime or whatever. But, he'd sell them for like 75 cents a pop. And, he made all this money and he was saving up for like a PlayStation or something like that. And he got there. He got there in a short time. And I'm like, good Lord, man. Like, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive.
I agree with you. I see it every single day. I see kids that are just, maybe they don't do their schoolwork, the way that they should. But if you look at the doodling on the side of their paper, it's like, holy smokes, like, you are so flippin' talented.
Yeah.
One of my artists from my books, Speak of the Devil, was a former student of mine. I noticed her drawing in athletics. She would bring a tablet, right, to the roll call line in athletics. And one day, I was like, hey, let me see what's in your tablet. And I looked inside and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, this is coming from a 7th grader.
Yeah.
So 5-6 years later, I hollered at her, now, I was paying her, I think for that book, I was her first paying gig and made like 50 or $60, per picture. And she just graduated art school in Canada.
Wow.
This past year. So it felt really nice to be able to go back and be like her first paying gig and know that I may have played like a small role in her becoming, what she's going to become.
Yeah. Chris,
But
Chris, obviously, being in education, you get to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do you think makes a good educator?
I think first and foremost, our educators need to have a heart for children. These kids, sometimes they're going to leave you high and dry. They're going to disappoint you. They're going to upset you. But at the end of the day, you got to have the ability to wipe the slate clean and then have a heart for these kids, regardless, good or bad. And sometimes, I see people that hold on to ill will sometimes, and justifiably so. It hurts to have your feelings hurt, right?
Yeah.
But you have to approach each and every day, with a new set of eyes, and don't hold on to grudges. And then I think the other part would be like have like some semblance of like classroom management. I'm going to say like discipline to me is very important, but it doesn't have to be mean. You just need to be regimented, right? Like you just can't be all over the place. Your kids need to know what is expected, when it's expected, and how it's expected. And they function so much better when there's like clear guidelines for expectations. I'm not talking about like a total monarchy. I'm just talking about like we're putting a fence around the backyard so that we can all be good neighbors.
Yeah, you're 100%, man. And I don't think it's just children. I think it's humans in general. We do better when we know the expectations of us, right? We know what the goal is. We know what the end is, or what it should be, right? Or what's expected of us. So it's much easier. It's much clearer if we have those expectations, as an adult or a child, right?
120%. I know that I'm a lot more efficient when I tighten up the screws, so to speak. And I've learned this over time. If you were to go back and look at me like years 1 through 5, like obviously, I wasn't as disciplined and structured, right? So I probably spent more energy than I needed to, just like on a jiu-jitsu mat, when we lack discipline with our movements, we're expending way too much energy, physically and emotionally. But as you get a little bit older in the game, you kind of realize like, all right, let me be economical with my movements.
Yeah.
Let me be efficient with my discipline. Let me make sure that when I do raise my voice, that it actually means something, and it's not something I'm doing, every 5 minutes, or else it means nothing.
Yeah, you're very right. Just the tonality in your voice, right, can make all the difference in how someone takes something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, something I also noticed about you is you're the host of the. Let me get this right. You have a podcast called Be Someone, correct?
Yeah, yeah. I've got a podcast. It's called the Be Someone Podcast. Now, I haven't done an episode in like, golly, it's probably been like a year or so. I got really busy with a lot of these other projects and things that I'm doing. But we've had about 175 episodes.
Yeah.
So there's some longevity, and we graduated. We went from having conversations, in the same room on my cell phone, to actually having like a full out camera crew and a place to actually like record. But as you know, it is a lot of work running a podcast, and golly, like one of the things that I didn't anticipate, but it was putting a ton of gray hair on my head, was like the coordinating.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard enough, like, and you can attest to this. It's hard enough coordinating between two individuals, but imagine like trying to coordinate, between like two individuals, and then trying to get your cameraman to make sure that he's available, and then trying to make sure that the venue is available. And some guests, they're very inconsiderate to everything that we have to do, and they can just drop you, at a moment's notice, and literally they know you've spent hours or maybe even days trying to get everything just right.
Yeah, as popular as podcasting is getting, a lot of people just don't realize it is a full-time job, and if you're especially, the more elements you add to the show, once you start adding video and editing and different things, it really becomes a big task. And not to mention the coordinating and all that goes into that, which podcasting, it's not like you can pay all these people tons of money to show up on your show. So a lot of it's just exposure. And sometimes you get it occasionally where people won't show up, or they back out last minute, or things happen, and you can't really fault them too much, but it's part of the game of podcasting, right?
But with that being said, if I could, oh my goodness, I would do it for a living. It is so much fun. Every time you talk to somebody,
Yeah.
it's like reading a book, and you get to learn from their mistakes and their successes. Like the way I feel after doing a good podcast is like nothing else I've ever done before. So I know that I talked about like the hard parts, but there are so many redeeming things about it, and hopefully, Lord willing, we can get the show back on the road when summer hits, because I miss it and I love it, and I'd love to do it full time if I ever had the opportunity.
Right. And so let's talk about the Be Someone podcast, and what's kind of the premise behind it, or what was the inspiration in starting it? What kind of topics do you like to get into?
So the Be Someone podcast, the premise is this: in Houston, we have this bridge, and it's got written in graffiti, "Be Someone," and it's kind of like synonymous with the city. We've taken pride in that little bit of graffiti. Some people look at it as like vandalism, but the city of Houston, for the most part, sees it as as a badge of honor, right? So I wanted to bring light to people that are mainly, from the city of Houston. So I talked to like professional wrestlers, because I love me some professional wrestling.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my man! And I talked to Brazilian Jiu-jitsu guys, MMA guys, doctors, lawyers, tattoo artists, like just like, whoever in my circle of friends, or, we'll call it like an extended network. Like, I just like talking to them, and it's addicting. And that's the premise. It's a pretty wide net, but it makes me happy.
There's so many different things. And with podcasting, the interesting thing about it is like, there's no parameters, right? You could do whatever you want. You could have a show on children's books. You could have a show on jiu-jitsu, on fighting, on wrestling. It doesn't matter. There's so many different broad varieties of topics that people enjoy. And a lot of times, people enjoy not just one thing, not just jiu-jitsu, but they enjoy multiple different things. So having a variety on your show is I think a wise idea, give the fans a little bit of taste of everything, right?
You know what else too? And this is like an unspoken part. I know that you're familiar with this too, but it's also like platforming people and giving, your audience an opportunity to meet this person that I find extremely interesting, and and you can help them grow and achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. So a lot of the MMA guys or jujitsu or professional wrestlers, right? Like they're always trying to grow their audience because they are their own brand.
Yes.
And anytime like we could help somebody out, I feel like we should.
Yeah, that's what it's about, uplifting one another and giving people a platform to get their message across, right? If there's no platform for them to get it out there, then a lot of times it just goes on deaf ears, right?
Oh my God, yeah. If you look at traditional media, like some of the stuff they choose to cover, it's very questionable, right?
Hmm.
But if you look around, like there's so many great people doing so many great things, and it's a shame that there's not enough room on the news to cover some of these people because we're too busy covering the local murder, or something something that doesn't deserve that kind of attention, but for whatever reason is getting that attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times I look back and I'm like, man, this podcasting, it's really evolving into something that, you look at our last election, we had presidents going on podcasts and stuff like that. That's crazy, right? Never before happened. There was never a platform like that. And now we got politicians, presidents, people from all walks of life going on podcasts. And I mean, they're getting tons of downloads, tons of views. And I'm sure as a podcaster, you got this a lot, but the messages you receive from putting out a show that impacts somebody, really, like when you read those messages, how it touched someone's heart or it changed the way they think, and it really is a rewarding feeling to have as a host or as a podcaster, right?
120%. Like you're absolutely correct in that. I think some of my best podcasts are like whenever I was able to platform some of the young fighters, especially the ones that we got coming out of our gym, and talking to them like as young amateurs, right? And then to see where they're at now, as professionals and, doing really, really well. But it was like a lot of their first opportunity, to speak and get their message out, and how grateful
Yeah.
those people are too for the opportunity.
Yeah, it's really impactful, man. And I think the more podcasts grow, the more information that's going to be available, and the more people are going to grab onto some inspiration and something that's going to help them. So, I'm excited to see where your podcast goes from here, man. I hope it comes back and comes back with a vengeance, and you take care of things, brother. But I want to get into what you're working on, and it looks like you've been working on this for quite some time now, and it's something I applaud tremendously, and I wish we could get more communities behind this, more states behind this, more people, educators behind this, but you're working to get jiu-jitsu involved in school. And talk to me about how that's been working. Talk to me about some of the developments that's been going on with it. And what drove you to do that?
So we'll start with the end part of that question. 20 years in education, and I've seen a lot of really good kids, but they just don't play the game of school very well. Kind of fall by the wayside. And these traditional means of we'll call it discipline. Like I don't think we should lose them. Like I think there is a spot for ISS. I think there's a spot for detention. But I think that we could be proactive and like we could take some of these kids and like we could put them into a jujitsu program inside of the school day to where like we could get that energy out, or they could have a positive mentor, someone to lean on that's not like their other teachers, right? Someone that's got that, that's walked a mile in their shoes, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we could course correct some of these kids, before they get, too far out of hand, because I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of like angry young people walking around right now, and they don't have anything to pour their heart and their soul and their spirit into.
Yeah.
I know what it's done for me. I know what my instructors mean to me, and the impact and influence that they have on me as a human being. So like, I want to help young people in the same way, but I want to do it during the school day, because jujitsu, it's an expensive hobby.
Yeah, it is.
I absolutely love it, but there's a lot of kids that can't afford, what it costs to go to a reputable gym, and there's a lot of kids that maybe they can, but their parents can't get them there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get an intervention program, built up to where like we could service these kids during the course of the school day.
Yeah, yeah, and I seen some of your updates and some of the stuff you've been having to go through, and hopefully you can enlighten us to a little bit about some of the red tape you've been having to get through to get this into action.
Yeah. So, first, it's amazing how many people do not know how to respond to an email or a phone call. Like that's been very disappointing to be ghosted. By people that I call friends, also, that I had a relationship with outside of school, and all of a sudden, like they won't return my calls or my emails, or they're very short with their responses. Uh, it that saddens me first and foremost, because we're in the business of doing what's best for kids. Even if we have a disagreement, we can at least like have a conversation, and you could talk to me about, well, Ortiz, this is why I don't think it'd be a good idea. But to not even, respond back to me is in poor taste. I would not do that to anybody else. Everyone deserves to be communicated with back.
Yeah,
Um, on the other front, one of the things that we're fighting is people have this. They have this idea that it's I don't know. It's like a bunch of knuckle draggers. Like it's a gladiator sport. Like everything is to the death, and that we're going to make school more violent. I believe, or they think that it is too dangerous to show to the kids. But if we want to take a step back and we want to look at things objectively, like I want people to look at high school football. These kids are throwing helmets on and shoulder pads, and they're launching themselves like torpedoes
yeah,
at other kids, and they're getting concussed. They're tearing ligaments and tendons and requiring surgery, heat exhaustion. Like every sport is going to have its injuries. That's kind of like the price of admission. But jujitsu is not any more or less dangerous. I would argue it's probably less dangerous than a lot of the sports that are being played. So there's an ignorance that I'm having to educate people on when it comes to Brazilian Jiu-jitsu.
yeah,
Practitioners know
yeah.
it's not that dangerous, but to the average suit, that doesn't go out and sweat and engage in these kind of activities, um, good Lord, it's
Yeah.
like,
People think it's they relate jujitsu to the UFC, right? And they think of the barbaric UFC fighters, out there knocking people out, when that's not quite the case with jujitsu. And if you look at high school wrestling or Greco-Roman wrestling or even freestyle, it's been around forever in the school systems. It's not very different than that, and some can even argue wrestling's tougher because of the weight cutting factor.
I would say even without the weight cutting, like when you get a good wrestler on you, like it's more of a hammer and nail sport, right?
Yes, yes, very true.
There's a little more physical dominance that takes place in wrestling. So just battling that ignorance, is something that I'm having to do. But with that being said, and you made the analogy of like the UFC fighter, some of these guys that actually say like we'll call them UFC fighters or people that are in combat sports, they're some of the most intelligent, kindest, empathetic human beings
Yeah.
that I know. They just have the means to be able to let's say destroy somebody, but it's not in their heart. They save that for the training room, and
Yeah.
even if you're in the training room, it's not to the death.
Yeah.
You never make it to the fight.
Very, very true, very true. And we're seeing kind of a shift, right? In you think of I've been a fan of UFC my entire life, and you think of those early days of the UFC and how barbaric it was, and how crazy it was. But now you see your average guy, walking the street may have these skills, and not even look like it. They're not some big tough guy. They may be a teacher or a doctor, and they have these skills to be able to protect themselves, right?
Yeah, and oftentimes they're the kindest, person in the room. They're too tired to want to fight anybody.
Yeah.
They're not threatened by anybody, and they have the confidence to walk into a room, and not have to be aggressive or anything of that nature. Like it's weird. It's the opposite of
Yeah.
what people, have in their mind. So ignorance is one of the biggest things that I'm having to battle right now. But with that being said, we're starting to make a little bit of headway. These podcasts, right? Like having this conversation. This is headway.
Yeah.
And I've had several podcasts reach out to me and talk to me about the subject because they feel the same way too. They know the good that jujitsu can do for our young people. And then you even have like organizations. Have you seen the Guardian Project?
Yes. Yeah. I was just talking to a gentleman about that, and it's very impactful, man. It's helping people all over the world, right?
Yeah, they're setting up gyms all over the world in Africa, South America. They're scholarshiping kids in some of the rougher neighborhoods in Los Angeles and Baltimore. Like there is a international movement to try to make the world a much nicer and kinder place using jujitsu as the vehicle. So this is I guess my attempt since I work in a school. I'm a highly decorated teacher. I happen to be a first degree black belt. Like I think I'm uniquely qualified to bring it inside of the schools because one thing I don't want to do is like I don't want it to be a watered down version. I don't want it to turn into what some people say karate turned into.
Yeah.
Like I want to make sure that we maintain its integrity, that we have good teaching going on from a knowledgeable individual, and the kids get the most out of the experience. That's what's important to me. I don't want to, and excuse my words, but I don't want to bastardize it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't really we don't want to take anything off of, that original. It's a self-defense martial art. It was never meant to be a sport like it is now, but it was meant to protect yourself if you ever needed to.
Mhm.
And, I saw one of your videos a while back, and you were kind of updating everyone on the status of where you're at with the program. And if you don't mind just sharing with my listeners, kind of where everything is, what they're requiring of you, what they want to see, and how we're going to be able to make this happen.
Okay, so I met with a couple of school districts. I met with there's a school district called Spring ISD that's a little bit south of us, and it's a rougher school district. If I'm going to be honest, socioeconomically, like it's not. They don't have the most money or the most funds. There's a lot of single parent households. Like it's a rough school district, but they reached out. And, we had a conversation with them. Their athletic director, and he advised us. He's like, this is a great idea. He's like, I'm tired of seeing, young black men and attending their funerals was, the quote that came out of his mouth. He's like, I went to 5 funerals last year or
Wow.
something, or maybe it was like the last 5 years. But he's tired of seeing these young people, resort to violence, whether it's like a gun or a knife or whatnot. And one of the things that we came out of that meeting with was you don't want to go. It's called UIL. In Texas, we have something called the University Interscholastic League, and it governs all sports. I really didn't want to go the sports route, but that was our in, But we went in, we bumped our head, we figured out, this route is not for us. So then I've reached out to a bunch of other school districts, getting ghosted. But my school district actually replied back to me, and they sat down for a meeting,
Wow.
and it was a gentleman by the name of Wade Haymark, and I'm gonna drop his name because like I hope he knows how appreciative I am of him just giving me his ear for like an hour, and he listened to me, and he took it back to his superiors, and he was the head of physical education. And that's one thing Spring said. They said, go through physical education, don't go through athletics. There's less red tape.
Yeah.
So he took it to his superiors and he said, like, okay, they think it sounds like a good idea, but you're going to have to like do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, all the way down to Z. But he gave me a roadmap, and the roadmap, the first part of the roadmap entails that I get some paperwork taken care of, which I'm going to get that paperwork taken care of. That's not a big deal at all. But I also needed some schools to take a chance and say that they would be willing to take part in a pilot program. So I've got one school where I have verbal confirmation from the administrator, the head administrator. I'm not going to say his name, but he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Yeah, let's do some business," right? And then I've got another meeting set up on April the 2nd with another school, And admittedly, both of these schools are a little rough around the edges, so I can see why they want, the help.
Yeah.
But I need some schools or a school to just step up and say, like, we'll be that pilot program.
So let me ask you this. So with starting a pilot program and all of the different things that they're wanting from you, what's approximately the time frame that if everything were to go perfect, that something like this might possibly catch on?
Okay. So the Mr. Haymark, one of the things that he told me is like that for next school year, he said like that ship has sailed. He goes like they make the budget for the next school year in September, October. So we're looking at 27, 28 would be the earliest. So I have to have my ducks in a row by September of this year, in order to present it to the next gatekeeper. And there's quite a few gatekeepers. And at any moment, one of these gatekeepers could come and say like, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm going to do the work. And one of the things that I'm doing on purpose, I'm not going to make a secret out of this, is that I've taken to social media and I want to win in the court of public opinion so that we can put pressure on our school board or our leadership in our school district. And I want it to be such a massively popular idea that they can't help but say, yes.
Yeah. I really admire that, man. And, obviously I'm from California, you're all the way in Texas and, I'm from a rough part of California. We're from Stockton and, home of the Diaz brothers. But it's also one of the number one murder places in the world. And our violent crime rate is getting really absurd. There was a violent attack just at Winco the other day. There was a shooting in the parking lot. And, I grew up in a rough part of this town and, thank God I got out of that area. But I had a lot of friends that I went to elementary school with that, went the gang route and got in with the wrong people, went into drugs and there was really no avenues to get us out of that area unless you moved away. And so something like what you're doing, it can not only be impactful in Texas, but I think all over the country. And, it's not the nice areas of town that need it the most. Like you said, it's those rough schools. It's those areas where, maybe they don't have mom and dad in the home or something along those lines that, those kids are going to benefit the most from it. And as a black belt in jiu-jitsu, you get two trained people in a room, they're not going to fight. More than likely, right? They're gonna more than likely find common ground with something, and most likely become friends.
Yeah, and you have famously two of the biggest examples of how like jujitsu can save someone's life with the Diaz brothers.
Yeah, very
Like,
true.
if they didn't happen upon Caesar Gracie and his teachings over there in Stockton, like who knows what they'd be doing?
Yeah.
They've even spoken on behalf of the Guardian program, and talked about how it's benefited them as young people. But like, here's something that's a fact. Like these young people are going to find a group or a community to be a part of. So we can either be proactive and give them a good group in a community to be a part of, or they can go find that group of community on their own, and they can be a bunch of knuckleheads that are up to no good.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to wait till like a situation gets like too bad and it's out of hand, or should we be proactive and should we seek out these kids and should we beat them to the punch, so to speak, and give them somewhere to pour their time, energy, love, need for a tribe, all of the above? Like, I do not see how we couldn't do something like this.
Yeah. That sense of belonging, man, it's in our human DNA. It's in our human nature, that tribalism of some sort, we want to belong to a group or, you see people that go to church and, they're really involved in their church community, which is great, right? You see the jiu-jitsu people and, you walk into a gym and they're like family members, hanging out all the time and best friends and, and whatever it is, but it's a sense of belonging, and it's, you could either join the gangs and belong, or you can join something positive and have that same sense of belonging, right?
100%, you know, and if I'm a school, something that I'm looking at is like schools are funded through attendance, right? And some of these rough kids are the ones that have the worst attendance. Man, hey, seems like common sense to me. I
Yeah.
think we could help with attendance, right? Which would help with funding, right? Classroom behavior and management. You know, if these kids, you know, have something to be excited about, if they have someone that's going to hold them accountable during the day, something to pour their energy into, so they're so darn tired that they can't misbehave in class, right? Like, why wouldn't we do this? It makes no sense. If you could throw a helmet on a kid and let him go get concussed multiple times, why can't we throw a gi on a kid and have him quote unquote pajama wrestle,
Yeah.
right? Learn a martial art and become a much more comprehensive human being in the process. Help the school culture. I don't know if your wife has told you about this, but there's probably 3 to 5% of the students in any school that eat up probably like 70 to 80% of the administrator's time.
Yeah. It
So
happens.
imagine if like you could take some of those most problematic kiddos, and you're not going to fix them all, but you can definitely help some and take some of that stress off of our administrators who are constantly having to get onto them and make phone calls home and question them over what you're not doing right. Like,
Yeah.
it's a no-brainer to me. It's a no-brainer to me, but there's a lot of ignorance that I'm having to fight through right now, and hopefully podcasts like this can go a long way to clearing that up.
Yeah, man. My envision, I would like for a roadmap for, obviously you're probably one of the first people in the nation that I've heard of doing this. There's probably others, but you're definitely doing the work out there. But if we can get people all over the country doing this and getting it into the school systems, and I mean, if you think about it, the cost of football, right? And let's just say football. You got a football field to build and all of the construction and infrastructure that goes along with that and funding, but all of the pads and equipment and training stuff, it's probably a lot larger of a cost as opposed to some mats on the ground, and a safe place to train, right?
100%. And here's the deal too. It's a legitimate career path. It's not an obscure sport anymore. We saw CGI pay out, $1 million to one of the Ruotolo brothers,
Yeah.
and then Nicky Rod, right? Each of those made life changing money, in one evening.
Yes.
And you see Dana White, like he's investing in jujitsu. I read an article where he's looking to like spend 11 to $12 million growing the sport of jujitsu. So if we look at it also as a possible career path, no, it's no longer like some fool's errand that I'm trying to run. We can actually, help kids go on a trajectory to where they too can start their journey as a, professional athlete. That's not the goal, but
It may
like,
happen, yeah. There may be several out of a program like that all over the country that do go that path.
yeah. And I'm going to tell you this too. I do believe that the local gyms, regardless of where we're at, I think they would appreciate a feeder system.
Yeah. There's not many of them that you can think of, right?
No, but imagine like in my mind, I've got this like kooky plan. I would like to work with like junior high kids and then shoot them off to their high school and help them get into their wrestling programs. Um, but what if like these local gyms could also help by scholarshiping some of these kids, or some of these kids could just pay their own dues or whatnot, and they could immediately join, their community jujitsu or MMA school, and who knows, where it could take them from there. But it's a door that was previously not open, and now we've just, given them something that they could walk through and potentially be very, very, very successful at.
Yeah. And man, I believe in this, man, and I think that regardless of your opinion, I think you're doing the Lord's work with it, and I think we need more people like you around this country. We have a need for it, man, and I think that it would really change a lot of communities. Like I said, man, I've seen a lot of people just live a rough life, man. There's a gentleman around town here, and it breaks my heart to see him every time, but we went to elementary school together. He's now living on the streets. You see him balancing shopping carts on his forehead, high on meth, begging for money. And we were in the same classroom several years in elementary school, you know, fifth, sixth grade. You know, I remember having him in the class, and, you know, he came from a rough family, and, you know, but really the school system kind of ignored it, you know, in a sense. You know, he never got, I remember he would tell the teachers, hey, I'm getting beat up at home, and things like that. And sometimes they'd take him out of class, but, you know, just to see where he's at now, it's like, man, if he had an avenue to get away from that environment, or some of those teachers were a little bit, you know, on top of things, you know, I wonder where he could have been today. You know, it just, it saddens me that, you know, one of my fellow students, you know, somebody I knew very well is on the streets. You know, it's horrible. That's the worst thing that you can imagine.
Oh my God. Me and my wife were on the computer the other day, and I was naming some kids that were pretty rough around the edges that I've taught over the years, and we were looking for them on the, we're looking for their mugshots. And, you know, probably with about 70% accuracy, somewhere between 60, could be higher, could be 80. But the names I was throwing out there, man, they already had mugshots. They already had mugshots, right? And it's sad because, you know, sometimes like these programs where they just like throw a tie on a kid and bring in the neighborhood banker to come and talk to him, like, that doesn't always speak to someone's soul. But like, that wouldn't have spoken to my soul. I would
No.
have, you know, hoped he had, like, would have thanked him for coming, but then, you know, would have said boring, you know, and can we go outside and play? And like, we have to meet kids where they're at, you know, and we can offer them something that they're truly interested in. Like the number of kids that see my ears, you know, and then they start fishing around, and then they start asking questions like, "You do jujitsu, right? You do MMA?" And like, "No, I don't do MMA. I practice a little striking here and there, but you know, I do a lot of jujitsu." You know, and they are so enthused, and there's like a weird level of respect that they give me that they didn't have before. And these are some of the rougher kids. These are the
Yeah.
ones who listen to anybody else, you know. But if I go like that, yes sir, yes sir, what do you need, sir? You know, why can't we help those kids more, you know, in a way that we can meet them where they're at? And I'm on the back nine of my career, 20 years in. I probably got like 7, 8 years left before I retire. uh, I want to do something that's groundbreaking, that's earth shattering, something that changes the course and changes the game of education. And this is it. Like, I know it in my heart. It's not a matter of like if, but when.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly with you, Chris. And, you know, it's really impactful, man. You know, a lot of people, at least as adults, I know, struggle with mental health, and jujitsu kind of is a way for them escape that. And people go into that gym and they could just release everything and just focus on what they're doing in the gym. But nowadays, you know, you hear a lot of kids, man, and I don't even like talking about this, but you know, suicide rate on kids nowadays is absurd. And you know, I can't help but to think, you know, what that would do for these kids that are struggling with mental health and things going on in their life, and giving them an avenue and giving them a path to go on that's, you know, positive, and can really help solve some of those issues, you know, other than, you know, going home and being depressed.
Yeah, especially like our young men right now. You know, for whatever reason, you know, the world is changing, and our young men are getting left behind. You know, a lot more fatherless, you know, households, lack of good leadership and mentorship. In sports, this is something that I've noticed. Like, there is a pay to play system, you know, so these kids that are don't have access to the clubs and the fancy teams outside of school, like, they're getting frozen out. You know, like, I challenge you to find like a good, you know, a good high school volleyball team in an impoverished, you know, community. You're not.
No.
You're gonna find good volleyball teams where the parents can afford to pay the 500-600 bucks a month,
Yeah.
you know, to pay the club dues, and you know, pay the $1,000 for the whole weekend to stay at the hotel, and the $1,000 for the plane tickets to go to, you know, Kansas City, or you know, go to Florida or whatnot. Like, it's getting harder for young people to have access to life changing physical activity. I want to meet these kids where they're at, and I think that we, as an educational system, we may not be able to service all of them, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to again water down jujitsu, but I do believe that we can serve as a good intervention, and we can give young people something to look forward to and something to pour their time and energy and possibly find a talent that they never knew that they had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, you find out things by doing jujitsu about yourself, right? Your will to fight, like when you're getting smashed, it's easy to just tap out and quit, but to push through something and push through that adversity and to keep going and until you technically get out of something, it teaches you a little bit about life when life struggles come at you and things happen that you weren't expecting, right? Life's not easy by any means, but when it hits you hard, it kind of teaches you, okay, I got a little fight in me. I can fight back on this. I don't have to just roll over, right?
Yeah, exactly like you said too. Like the awareness, like to be in the moment. Nothing else exists when you're on the mats, and that's something that I don't think people have access to. We're constantly like we're here, but we're not here, especially because of our phones. And when you're on the mats, you can't be anywhere else. Like you have to have that singular focus, and people don't get that anywhere else. There's few places. I think yoga is another place where you could possibly get that, but I'm not good at yoga, so I'm not going to teach yoga. But how about this? How about the actual act of tapping out?
Yeah.
Like
surrendering. Okay. Yeah.
It's okay to know when your goose is cooked and you just need to cut your losses, right? Like, let's say you get pulled over, you're a 16-year-old and you get pulled over, and the policeman's talking to you. And some young people, are going to feel the need to, badmouth and get loud with the cop and make the situation worse. Why not just like tap out in that situation, surrender the situation, acknowledge that he has the power over you, and let's just get the ticket and get the heck out of there and just continue on living instead of making like a rash decision and then getting shot, right? Like there's so many life lessons that can be learned. If we're trying to educate our kids, I don't see how we wouldn't want to offer something like this.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I really believe in what you're doing, man. And, I've been seeing you, like you were saying earlier, do a lot of podcasts and things like that. And to help spread the word. And, if more of us could get on board with sharing your posts, sharing your story and getting the name out there and what you're trying to do, I think that this is something that can really change people's lives. And if more people in more states and more areas and counties would adopt something like this, at least give it a chance, right? Try it out. If it's not working, if you guys got problems, I understand, but give it a fighting chance first before you make that decision and see what it can do for your students and see what it can do for your just general community.
Yeah, I like what you said right there. Like, there is no guarantee that this is going to work, right? Like, I don't have a crystal ball. I know in my heart, which I don't know how far that goes, but in my heart of hearts, I know that I can make this work. And I need an opportunity with a pilot program. I would love it, in a perfect scenario for someone to say, here, I'm going to give you 2 years to make this work. And let's see what happens, and we can track, different things like behavioral data, attendance, grades, interactions, and we can track all that data, and we could see, the difference between the kid before and after. But before any of that gets done, like somebody has to pull the trigger and say, yes, let's make it happen, So hopefully that person's listening right now. I know that there's a handful of people that are going to listen to me at least. But yeah, like you said, your community, the Jocko Willings of the world, which has been pretty cool. He's retweeted and thrown on his story some of my podcasts that I've done and some of the clips that I've done. That's and awesome. Weirdly enough, I think that it's kind of helped me get my foot in the door with some of these meetings. The Joe Rogans, the Dana Whites, like, let's sit down and let's have a conversation and make this a mainstream conversation, instead of something that's just kind of like happening in the shadows of the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the more awareness people have of this, I think the more people's going to be on board with it, man. And I can't help but but to think there's got to be a principal somewhere that's training jujitsu, or somebody that's involved, or maybe their wife's training or their son's training or whatever it is, right? There's got to be somebody out there. And, the more exposure we get to things like this, the more podcasts that you're on, the more that we're talking about it, the more that people are going to be aware and more likely to give it a chance. And that's just what we need, right? We just need one person to give it a chance and kind of see where it goes from there.
I love what you said. I tell people that all the time. Like, you don't need a million. You just need one.
Yeah.
So somebody, hopefully, that meeting, on April 2nd, or the gentleman, that had told me, like, hey, let's roll. Like, hopefully he's a man of his word, and he at least green lights it on his end. And if a gatekeeper, ends up saying no, well, then well be it. It was out of his hands. But golly, let's give it a chance, man. Let's give it a chance. So many people have had their life saved because of martial arts. Like, why not? That's the biggest thing. Why not us?
Yeah, why not? And man, it's let me ask you this, Chris. If you're not successful with this run of getting it going, are you going to keep pursuing this and try in different areas to make this happen?
Mm-hmm. If this go round doesn't work, we're gonna gather the data. We're gonna regroup, and you're gonna see a more concentrated effort. I don't know what that'll look like. It may be more podcast and whatnot. Because I have noticed that there's a lot of momentum. Like this week, I was on a show on it's called Houston Live TV, and it's a pretty popular show here in Houston. And talking to the host, during the show, and then another 30 minutes after the show, like, to see how that made sense to him. And he's like, yeah, and all the different examples he was giving me, about how we pour all our time, energy, and resources into some of the hardest kids. But then there's little to no, payback. Like, they're still failing, and they're still making poor decisions, and they're still, going out into life and doing wrong. He's like, why wouldn't we try something like this? Because what we're doing is not working. Yeah. And I think that's like the definition of insanity, right? Like, trying the same thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you could probably agree to this, but there's things in our education system that have been broken for many, many years, and bridging the gap and trying to, repair these things and make it to where these kids have a fighting chance coming out of school. That's what it's about. It's about making a difference. And sometimes these things are out of both mine and your control, but we need people to continue on these journeys and to keep, fighting the good fight and trying to make something like this happen.
Yeah. And again, if it's not going to be me, I think that we will see somebody break through. And once, that one person breaks through and they show some promise with something like this, I think that you'll see the floodgates open up. And I mean, think about a world too, like, where, like, there's a lot of like practicing martial artists that they don't have the money, let's say, to open up their own school or something, but maybe working inside of a school, making like $70K a year, and working a 9 to 5 and working with, problematic youth. Like, it opens up career paths for other, martial artists that have a heart for kids like that.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not trying to attack like the premium schools, the high end schools. Like, no. If given a choice and an opportunity, you want to go over there, right? But with that being said, like, if this is what we got and we want to service and we want to take care of your young person inside of the school day, why not? Why not too? So in my head, I've got so many different ideas. I want to vet the kids that come in. I want to make sure they're the right kids. I want to make sure that their parents are on board. I want to make sure that the administration, like, I want everyone to know, like, what exactly you're getting yourself into, because it's a heck of a ride, but it's one hell of a roller coaster.
Yeah. Yeah. You're very true on that, man. And, man, like I said, I wish you nothing but success in what you're doing, man. And, I just want to say, in wrapping this up, man, if you could go out and support Chris and, really everything he's doing, man, he's really, making an impact. I encourage you to go check out his Instagram page and see the different posts he's put out on what he's trying to do. And, you can tell, and just having a conversation with you, man, you really have a good, sincere heart for this. And, I just wish that we can get this going and get more people on board with it as much as possible. And I believe that these podcasts are going to help, man. It may not be tomorrow, it may not be next week, but, it's going to pick up some momentum at some point, and, it's bound to catch on to people. So, Chris, man, I encourage you, let's keep it up. I'd like to talk to you a little bit down the road and kind of see where everything's at, get an update on you, and update on where the program's at. And, just keep in touch, and hopefully we can spread this movement across the country. I like I said, I know in Stockton, we definitely need this. And, if we can start in one place, we'll have the blueprint to kind of take it around and use that in other places. So, Chris, just in wrapping this thing up, I just want to say thank you for your time and getting to hear your story and getting to hear what you're doing, man. It really has gotten me motivated to try to do something in my community a little bit more. And, the reason I started my gym last year was I'm not here to make money. I'm here to make an impact. And that's what it's about to me is, touching the community in a way that no one else has, and using the years of jiu-jitsu and turning it into something very special. And, man, I can see that you have a really good heart, brother. And I just encourage you, keep it up, man.
Yeah. With that being said too, like, I want to say that the only people in my life that there's a handful of people that can still like impact and influence me, in a major way. And it's people like you, that have the gym. I've had like these two epiphanies over the last couple of years, and both of them, one came from my jujitsu coach and the other one came from our striking coach. So, you continue to do what you do, because what that does is that it feeds people like me in my mind and my heart, my spirit, and encourages me to go out and be a better version of myself. So you keep doing what you're doing. You're also doing the Lord's work, so to speak.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. And I just want to say again, man, thank you for your time. Thank you for educating the fans on what you have going on. And like I said, if we could get behind you, Chris, I definitely want to do that. Can you just at least for the listeners, tell everyone how they can get a hold of you, how they can get on board, how they can share your information?
Yeah. So I have a one-stop shop. I have something called Coach Ortiz.com, CoachOrtiz.com. And it's got all my books and it's got my different social media links, but like Instagram, where I'm super active, it's Chris Ortiz 3946. And then that's about it right there,
Yeah, and I always like to give my guests just a couple minutes at the end. Usually they want to shout anybody out, but if you have a message for the fans that you want to get across before we get off the air, I just want to give you a few minutes. Take the time. The floor is absolutely yours.
Yeah, everyone, if this is a cause that you believe in, do me a favor and, hit that share button on a Facebook post and on an Instagram post. It's an idea that's wildly popular. You wouldn't imagine the number of teachers and coaches that come and talk to me, off the cuff and tell me like, oh, coach, I got some kids that, they really need some of your jiu-jitsu, so I know it's wildly popular by what people are telling me in person. And I also see it on social media. And hopefully, some of these people that are movers and shakers, like your Dana Whites, man, a conversation with you, Dana, could be a game changer, right? Like Jocko, a conversation with you talking about the benefits of what jiu-jitsu can do for our young people would be a game changer. Like getting a conversation that's going to be seen by millions, it's going to probably be the thing I believe that pushes us, past that goal line. So continue to share and spread the word, because like you said, we're just one person away. And this needs to be the right person from setting this thing on fire. So I appreciate it. And hey, thank you, bud.
Yeah,
thank you.
Absolutely, man. It's been a pleasure to have you, man. And I encourage you, go out, support Chris and everything he's doing, man. You're a great guy, dude. I talk to people. Sometimes my interviews are goofy, sometimes they're fun, whatever the case. But man, this one has really like touched me. And, I got chills a couple times when you were talking about certain situations because I lived them, man. And, I'm blessed to be here. I'm blessed to be a business owner in the town and not behind bars, and, we need more people like you, Chris, spreading the word of jiu-jitsu, spreading the gospel of jiu-jitsu, if you want to say, but, it's very impactful. And, thank you again for taking the time. Fans, download each and every episode of the podcast. We're available each and every week on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. But hit that share button. Try to blow this thing up so we can help out our local community. This is Grapplers Talk, and the way this thing's gonna grow and the way our community is gonna grow is by helping each other and uplifting each other's causes. So once again, Chris, thank you for taking the time and being a part of this. Thank you, fans, for downloading the podcast. This has been an awesome episode. Once again, this is Dave, and we are...
This is Grapplers Talk.